Have you ever wondered how a company figures out the price of a bus ticket? Or, say, a night in a hotel? I mean, these aren't physical products you can hold in your hand. They're services. Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on something called service costing. It's the method businesses use to put a price on the intangible. Let's get right into it.
Seriously, think about it for a second. When you buy a coffee, you're paying for stuff, right? The cup, the beans, the milk. It's a real physical product. But a bus ride or a night in a hotel? You're paying for an experience, a service. So how in the world do companies calculate the cost of something you can't even touch? That's the exact puzzle we're going to solve today.
All right, so to get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the core concept itself. So what exactly is service costing?
At its heart, service costing, which you might also hear called operating costing, is basically the accounting toolkit for any business that provides a service instead of a physical product. And what's the goal? Well, it's to take something you can't touch, like a bus journey, and give it a solid, concrete cost for a specific, measurable unit. It's all about making the invisible visible on the balance sheet. And you bump into this everywhere, literally every single day. The bus or train that gets you to work, the electricity powering your screen right now, even the water for your coffee this morning. Hospitals use it to figure out the cost of your care, hotels use it for your stay, and yeah, even cinemas use it for your movie ticket. It's the financial engine running the whole service economy.
Now, if you really want to get how this all works, you have to understand one single pivotal concept. It's what I like to call the secret sauce of service costing, the cost unit.
Everything, and I mean everything, boils down to this. A cost unit is just the basic, measurable piece of a service that a company can slap a cost onto. You know, you can't just cost a bus ride as some vague idea. You need a super precise unit to measure. And that's where it gets kind of cool, because there are two main types.
So on one hand, you've got the simple cost unit, and like the name says, it measures just one thing. Pretty straightforward. But on the other hand, you have the composite cost unit. Now this is where things get clever. It actually combines two different units to give you a much more accurate picture of the service you're actually delivering. Let's look at some real-world examples to make this crystal clear.
Okay, for a simple cost unit, a transport company might just look at its cost per kilometer that its vehicle travels. A water company might figure out the cost per 1,000 liters they deliver. And a canteen? Super easy. They can just calculate the cost per meal they serve. See? It's pretty simple, right? One service, one measurement.
Now let's switch over to composite units. What's so interesting here is that extra layer of detail. A transport company isn't just driving kilometers, it's carrying people. So per passenger kilometer is a way better metric, right? A hospital gives care in beds over a period of time, so per bed per day makes total sense. And it's the same logic for a hotel with per room per day. This composite unit just gives a much truer cost.
All right, theory's down. We get it. Now let's see how these cost units are actually calculated out in the wild. Yep, it's time to do some math.
Let's use this classic bus company example. We've got all the key info right here. There are 4 buses, the route is 50 kilometers. Each bus can hold 50 people, but they're usually only 80% full, and they each do one round trip every day for 25 days. So, how do we turn all of that into one single useful number? Our goal here is to calculate the total passenger kilometers for the whole month.
The calculation is really just a matter of multiplying everything together step by step. We start with our 4 buses. We multiply that by the 50-kilometer distance. Then we multiply that by the 50-passenger full capacity, and then we adjust for the real world, that 80% usage. Since each bus makes a round trip, we multiply by 2. And finally, we multiply by the 25 days they operate.
And there it is. Boom! The total service provided for the month is 400,000 passenger kilometers. Now the bus company has this one super powerful number. They can take their total monthly costs, divide it by this figure, and find out the exact cost per passenger kilometer. That is the bedrock for setting a fair ticket price.
Okay, that was a pretty good warm-up. But what happens when things get a little more complicated? Let's take a look at a freight truck that's loading and unloading goods at different stops along its route.
So, for a situation like this, there are 2 common ways to calculate the composite cost unit, which in this case is ton-kilometers. The absolute method is super precise. It calculates the value for each leg of the journey separately. The commercial method is more of a shortcut. It just uses an average load across the entire trip. So you've got this strategic trade-off, right? Accuracy versus simplicity. Let's see how they both work.
Okay, with the absolute method, we break the trip down into pieces. For that first leg, it's 10 tons carried for 40 kilometers. Easy. For the second leg, after they've dropped some stuff off, it's 6 tons for 60 kilometers. And for the final leg back, they've picked up a new load, so it's 8 tons for 80 kilometers. You add them all up, and you get a very precise total of 1,400 ton-kilometers.
Now for the commercial method. This is the quick and dirty way. We just average the different loads, 10, 6, and 8 tons, which gives us an average of 8 tons. Then we just multiply that by the total distance of the whole trip, 180 kilometers. That gives us 1,440 ton-kilometers. So it's a slightly different number, yeah, but it's a much quicker calculation. Companies just choose whichever method works best for them.
So we've figured out how to calculate the service units. But what about the cost part of service costing? To really understand that, we need to look at the 2 basic building blocks of cost that make up the total.
And this graph shows the idea perfectly. Just look at that blue area down at the bottom. Those are your fixed costs. See how that line stays flat no matter how much service you're providing? Now, the yellow area on top, those are your variable costs. And see how they go up and up as the quantity of service increases? Put them together, and that's your total cost.
So fixed costs, sometimes called standing charges, are the expenses you have to pay no matter what. Think about a bus company's office rent or the license fees for their vehicles. They have to pay those bills whether the bus moves an inch or not. Variable costs, on the other hand, are tied directly to the service itself. The more kilometers that bus travels, the more it's going to spend on fuel, oil, and tires. A business has to cover both of these to make a profit.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We kicked this off by asking how a bus company prices a single ticket, and now we've seen the mechanics behind it, all the way from passenger kilometers to fixed and variable costs. But here's the thing, knowing the costs is only half the battle. The real challenge is turning that cost into a price that feels fair to the customer, but is also profitable for the business. That's where accounting meets strategy. So the next time you tap to pay for a service, you'll know a little more about the complex dance of numbers happening behind that simple transaction. Thanks for joining us.